And hello, welcome to the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up, and I've got my friend John Miller on today, and I'm excited about this one. We're going to be, so we've had some Blazor shows in the past, and of course, you know, people think of this as like your standard desktop app. Last week, we got a demo from Dan Roth, and he showed using Blazor in a desktop application, like with Maui. So, you know, we've got web and desktop, and then now today you're going to show us building Teams apps.
Yes, that's right.
That is crazy, amazing stuff. So very cool. I'm looking forward to learning a lot. I, read your blog post, but I'm looking forward to going deeper and learning more. But as always, we start with the community links because the community is awesome and they do tons of cool stuff. So let's go for it. Like every week, I think, oh, I don't have that many links. And then, oh, there's one more. And then there's one more. And then pretty soon there's 1,000 links. So I will share them in the chat. And they're going out. And let's dig in. So first of all, so this is fun. Matthew does these series on building games and with Blazor. And it's neat thinking of Blazor because you've got this like long-running component-based thing. For me, I think of web as like request response, and I kind of forget that when you've got something like Blazor where you've got long-running and browser application, you can pretty well model a game. So, question, just real quick thing. Blazor, I should talk about. Blazor is built on top of WebAssembly, which is a browser standard, and it's built on top of that, and it allows running C# and .NET code in the browser. So we'll be seeing a lot more of that, but it is the markup is all HTML. It's standard HTML, CSS, but it's just your logic instead of JavaScript, or in addition to JavaScript, you can use C#. So pretty cool stuff. Also, another neat Blazor one. This is Michael Washington, and he's writing about creating a tree with checkboxes. And I don't see this quite as much anymore, but sometimes when you're navigating complex data, checkbox tree is a good system for doing that. And so he shows, building out the node structure, deeply nested, collapsible tree. And yeah, pretty cool stuff. So goes through, one thing that I love about his posts, and he's been posting for years and years, and he writes really high quality posts. He writes these cool diagrams and stuff. So he really takes some time to illustrate, they're like book quality posts. And so it's really nice to see that. Cool. All right. This is a neat one from Mukesh. So I was aware of Mediator, and it's an implementation of the Mediator pattern for .NET from Jimmy Bogard, who turns out a ton of stuff. But I was not aware of how powerful this pipeline thing is in Mediator. So he talks about, there's different ways that you can handle caching with ASP.NET. You've got like Redis or in-memory caching. But if you're using Mediator, you can use this built-in, wow, that's a flashy there. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. You can use Mediator's built-in pipeline to handle caching for you. So this is pretty slick, being able to, build out using the Mediator pattern, and then just layer on top of that. And there are other things that are available in this pipeline, but caching is just kind of directly built in. So this is, I've got a lot of links, and I'm not going to go dig into the in-depth code on a whole lot of them, but I just kind of want to share that this is an available thing. So, all right. This is a neat one from Damian Bowden. So he's talking about verifying vaccination data using zero-knowledge proof with ASP.NET Core and Matter. So Matter is let me see, I looked this up earlier. So this is at matter.global, and this is a system for digital interactions and kind of certificates and, digital verification and all that kind of stuff. Sounds like a lot of buzzwords when I first read it, but it's neat seeing how Damien uses it to implement this. So here we've got credentials, we've got vaccination data providers and issuers. And so we can actually hold that information in the form of a QR code, and then we can go and verify that information. So he shows how to do that, and then how to integrate that with Matter. And then as we go down lower, we can see here that this actually verifies that and verifies that that data is accurate. So that's cool. So we got another. So I did share before the links in the tabs. It's the URL list, and so that's, and I will share again at the end. And the links are at the bottom of the screen as well there too. So, all right. Steve sharing with us that information on debugging C# source generators. I don't know about you, John. I think these source generators are super interesting. Like, the idea is that you can take code, including things like, I don't know, JSON. I've seen people generate code from all sorts of things. We're using them internally with Entity Framework. We're using them with Razor, and we're using those internally at Microsoft, but we're seeing the community build all kinds of really cool things too. So they generate optimized code at build time based on the source. And the source can be, like I said, any kind of different input. Debugging them can be a little complicated. And so Steve goes through and talks about how to get that set up. So he explains, what you need to do, the workload you need to add, and then just a whole step-by-step guide, that you've got to go and make settings in your project, and then just kind of shows how to go through and do that. When you build and debug, he also talks about some additional gotchas that you can run into. And so just a lot of good information. This is something I have not personally had the chance to build and play with C# source generators. Try and say that 10 times fast. But I think it's a really cool, fun, interesting idea, and I can't wait to. So,
agreed. Anytime you can write code that writes code,
right?
my mind starts to stretch a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, way back in the day, we used to, I worked at a company, and we were writing the same collection classes over and over again, and we built all different kinds of code generators and stuff. It's amazing when it works, and then you're like, wow, like you said, code that writes code. So. Playwright.net just shipped version 1.0, and so that is exciting. Playwright.net is so it's a .NET version of the Playwright testing and automation library. So this is a big popular system that works on all kinds of different modern web apps, and it can be a lot simpler than some of the other kind of browser automation systems that people have used in the past. I've heard a lot of good things about it. And then Playwright.net makes it a lot simpler to build and integrate that with your, tests and things directly in .NET. So congratulations to the team on shipping. All right. A short one here. .NET 6 preview is available on App Service. And this includes, I believe, did I read in here? I think, yeah. So it's available on both Windows and Linux App Service. So you can get started, deploying your applications today. That's pretty cool. Okay, a few things that are days and things that are coming up, some free virtual events. So we've got Blazor Day. I was just chatting with Dan Roth about some Blazor stuff yesterday, and he was telling me about this, and this is very exciting. So that's coming up. We've also got .NET Conf Focus on F#. That's coming up in July. And we've got Let's Learn. We've got a Let's Learn event scheduled for the 25th, and that's on Blazor. So that is a 2-hour just introduction to Blazor. So especially if you're watching today and you're like, this is neat, but I don't really get, I need to start from the basics. This is your opportunity to do that. So it's coming up. All right. Here are some really long, interesting posts. So there's a series that Richard's been putting out, Richard Lander, on the .NET team, and he does these in a conversation format. So we've got a few of these. And so you can kind of picture this is a group of people sitting around with a cup of coffee and having these in-depth conversations. So this one's about diagnostics, and this is especially interesting to me in terms of open telemetry and some of the diagnostic work that's been going on for microservices and stuff. So I think did I freeze?
Yeah, it looks like your video may.
Oh my goodness. I wonder, I may have to refresh my browser and see what happens.
Exciting.
Okay. Oh, what's going on here? That is magical. Let me see if I can close some things. Does that seems to be back?
You're back.
Back. Okay. Just randomly closing things sometimes helps. All right. So anyhow, this is one about, and I need to talk faster so that we can get to your good stuff. So this is one about diagnostics. This is one about containers. And this is a who's who of interesting people talking about containers, all kinds of stuff there. And then here, a conversation about the .NET type system. So this is your lunch breaks for the rest of the week. Just, power through them. Another neat one about Datetime and Timezone enhancements for .NET 6. This is some of these things that we just have gotten used to. And then when you read this post, you're like, oh yeah, why do I have to deal with that? So for instance, there's date only and time only types, which is really useful. So there's a lot of time where I'm just creating a date and time doesn't make sense here. So it's nice to be able to just create a date only or time only type. So information about how to do that, how to convert back and forth, all that kind of stuff. There's also an explanation of naming, because as I started reading it, I was like, why'd you call it that? And then they talk about, here's why. And, it's funny. People assume Microsoft is just making up stupid names, and you wouldn't believe all the time we put into naming things. And so, here's an explanation of how that works. So anyways, and call out to Datetime and talking about how this fits in with that, etc. So, all right. This was one I was excited about. I am a big fan of Project Thai, and the Visual Studio Code extension has been kind of in a, internal preview for a while, and we finally shipped it. So this is pretty cool. There's a lot of videos in here showing how to use it, and it's pretty magical how it works. It's basically you run your Thai application, it discovers everything, and then you can just kind of go in and click, and it brings up the dashboard. It can go in and debug things, all kinds of neat stuff. So, all right, here's one. We're making a big effort to share customer success stories across all of .NET, but especially Blazor. And I'll be totally honest. We have a lot of customers that are saying, "Hey, I would like to use Blazor, but my boss says it's too new," or I don't want to go first. I want to hear more about other people using it. So here's an example. We've got like the Postage, we've got GE Aviation. We've got some big names, but we'd like to add some more. I saw earlier in this that somebody mentioned, "Hey, I'm using Blazor." So let us know. And there's a thing down at the bottom here where it says submit your story. And when you click on that, then it's just a short little form. It's just basically like, tell us who you are. You can describe your app. You can also say like, "Hey, can we contact you and get more information?" And even if you're like, "Hey, I'm not sure if, I may not want to share the name of my company, or I may not want to I'm building this for a customer and we can't share their specifics or whatever." We can figure that out. Maybe we can just say like for a large airline provider or whatever, So, so if you've got something, you're doing something interesting with Blazor, let us know. We'd love to hear. All right, just a few more. This is one you shared with me as we were waiting for the show to start. This is Blazor Teams. So this is a Blazor component library for building applications with Microsoft Teams. So anything to add on that? I don't.
A cool project that came across my desk, I think, is worth noting. It's just cool to see just more options for building Teams applications using C# and in this case Blazor. And I like what's in this project, and I think it's pretty cool. So I think it's worth checking out.
Very cool. All right. And then this last one, this is your blog post. This is what prompted you.
That's for last.
This is the last one. So this was what prompted me to say, "Hey, John, let's get you on the show and talk about this." So I don't know. Do you want to switch over to your screen and talk about, or do you want to go through the post, or what do you want to do here?
Yeah, let's switch over to my screen, and I'll kind of just demo and kind of go through what's in the post, and then anyone that wants to, read it later and catch any of the details maybe I missed, there's lots of links to documentation and stuff in there too.
Awesome. Okay.
Cool. So first thing here, let me bring this over. The Teams Toolkit is what I'm talking about. So I imagine you can see that. Let me bump that up a little bit. So the Teams Toolkit is a preview extension right now that we're shipping in the Visual Studio Marketplace. And it's an extension for Visual Studio 2019. And there's also a Teams Toolkit extension for VS Code. And basically what they both do is they give you a jump start at scaffolding applications for Teams. In code, you can do TypeScript and JavaScript. And in VS, we'll focus on C# and right now using Blazor. And you can scaffold out a project. And then the idea also is to kind of encapsulate all the really difficult configuration steps needed to get those applications working with identity and SSO and publishing and any deployment need and setting up things on the Teams portal and Azure and et cetera. So we want to just make it very easy to go from file new project to your application running in the cloud, and you can see it in Teams. So this is kind of the main entry point right now. You can download the preview extension on the Teams Toolkit or on the VS Marketplace and then install it to Visual Studio 2019. And so I just want to take a look at that and kind of show that. So if I already have it installed here in Visual Studio 2019, I've already done that. And kind of the main entry point into the toolkit is to create a new project. And you can see here, if I just search Teams, after I install, you'll get this new project template called Microsoft Teams app. Can name it something, and I'll just choose the defaults here. And then there's another step here in the wizard where you can choose the name of your Teams application. So this would be the name that appears in Teams, not necessarily like the solution name for the source files and things. I'm just going to leave the default as my new Teams app, and I'll just leave the company that. And these are things that you can configure later. Just nice to be able to control them now. So I'll go ahead and click Create. and Visual Studio will create a Blazor Server application for me that's already kind of set up to work with Teams. So right now we kind of prompt you with this getting started text to give you a couple steps on what's required to get this running. So there's one step that you have to do right away for it to work in Teams. And that's this first step here, which is to configure for a single sign-on. So we have this menu option, project, Teams effects, and then configure for SSO. So I'll go ahead and click that. And this will only take a few seconds, hopefully, and that's done. So we get this output here, and a lot has happened pretty quickly. But basically what's happened is we've gone ahead and created an Azure AD registration using my tenants. You can see there's my tenant information. And we've also configured this application on the Teams developer portal, which is kind of the admin experience for managing your Teams apps. And we've connected the two things, and then we've set up all of that information in this manifest file, which is specific to Teams apps. And this is kind of what the Teams dev portal cares about. So we've gone ahead and put in all your app ID information. We've configured the website URLs. Right now it's just set up for localhost debugging. And we've configured the API endpoints for handling auth. So we've kind of set up everything that's required. It typically would be a very long document of multiple steps. And it's all, right now, we've all done it in just one click. So if I just go ahead and press F5, I'll just go through, or I'll click Start Debugging. I'll go ahead and run this, and I have to bring the browser over to the other screen. Hold on one second. Let my browser launch. Okay. So let's go ahead and open up my Teams tenant in a browser, and here's my new app that I just created. Teams is asking me, do I want to install this? I do. So I'll click the Add button. And then my app will be running inside of Teams here. And you can see right here on the left-hand toolbar here is a new Teams app. That's the name of my Teams. This is called a tab application. And it's getting my name from the Teams SDK. And that's the basic of the sample so far. And let me just dive back into the source code here and show you what's kind of cool is this tab page is kind of the main part of this sample. So this is the page that you see running, and there's some code in here, but you can set breakpoints just like you would expect in Visual Studio. So I'll set a breakpoint in this get user profile photo method, which if I bring back up my Teams app, that's I think a handler for this button. So if I go ahead and click that button, which the idea is that I can give authorization for this app to use the Graph API to get some more information about me. You can see I've already hit my breakpoint here, and I can step through this as I normally would and go ahead and just continue. And now I need to get permissions so that way we can use the Graph API. So I'll go ahead and do that. And it's just going to grab some more information about me. I'll go ahead and continue. Got my profile photo. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, what's the hosting model? Is this Blazor Server? Can you, or Blazor WebAssembly?
Yeah, sorry. I thought I mentioned it. So this is a Blazor Server app.
Okay.
That's what the template we've chosen right now.
Cool.
We're looking at Blazor WebAssembly as well. We have some other ideas of other templates that might make sense. But really, we're at a point right now where we are open to feedback and kind of building this community, seeing what people, what people's needs are, what their use cases are, and what makes sense. So if the community has some ideas, hey, we'd really like to see this, we'd love to hear it. But right now we've chosen Blazor Server.
One really nice thing about Blazor Server is the really like this tiny download, and so like from a quick load standpoint, and then also being able to integrate with server side dependencies can be really nice too. So
yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense as a Teams application too, because you want kind of this like update experience where you don't have to be refreshing pages and things. So your application can work inside of Teams, and I think it works out pretty nicely. But again, it's also Blazor. So if you're not using Blazor, then that'd be something to think about. So that's the basics of the demo. Basically, you can do a file new project, choose Microsoft Teams app. You can configure the project, and we do a bunch of registrations for you to set all that up in a single click, and then you're ready to press start debugging, and your app is running inside of Teams. So I think that's a pretty great start at creating Teams applications, and I think it might make sense to talk a little bit more about what exactly is a Teams app.
Yeah, sure.
I've kind of glossed over that. So let me bring this over, because we have a lot of great documentation that kind of explains this probably a lot better than I can. But there are a lot of different options for like what a Teams app is. And what I've shown you in the sample is basically a personal app as a tab. So that means that in my Teams tenant, that app that I just ran will display for me only. So I've installed it to me. And it shows as a tab, so on the left-hand side there in the toolbar. But there's also options where you could make them an app for a channel, so it shows up in a whole channel for every user. There's bot applications. These are all basically extensibility points for Teams. So ways that you might want to integrate and make your scenario like more tightly integrated with Teams. So you can extend messaging or meeting. There's all sorts of different options here. So I would definitely check that out and see if there's an extensibility point that makes sense for you. And these are all parts that we want to make simple. Right now, we've started with tabs. Next, we're looking at bots on how we might be able to do bot applications with Blazor using the Teams Toolkit and configure all of the bot framework and add all the relevant libraries for you and kind of create like a ready-to-go solution. We're looking at that now. And yeah, so that's kind of what Teams apps are.
Another question from Curious Drive on how to convert an existing Blazor Server app into a Teams app.
Yeah, love that question. That's a great point. And we do. I'm trying to think if the documentation is still here, but there is some documentation here on how to take an existing ASP.NET app and what you need to do to configure it to work. So basically, kind of reverse engineering everything that the Teams Toolkit will do for you in the single click that we have. But we don't have any type of like migration tool at the moment. That's something that we're kind of looking at, is how do you take an existing Blazor app, existing ASP.NET app, and how do you like Teamsify it? There's like a breadth of options out there on what we might support. And so we're really trying to nail that down right now. So, just looking for developers to work with and chat with about requirements, what they might like to see, what's worked in the past, what hasn't. So yeah, would love to hear more from people who are interested in that scenario.
I'm also like curious as far as the whole hosting, like here you're showing debugging locally, but when you deploy it, is this something you just deploy like to an Azure app service, or, like,
yeah, great point.
Traditional like web hosted application?
Yeah, so let me bring this over. So let me refresh this page. So a Teams app isn't really uploading any binaries or any bits to the Teams dev portal. All you're really uploading is that manifest file. So that file that I showed in the ID that kind of defines where your app lives. In this case, you can see right here is my personal tab. It's just named the personal tab by default, and it has a URL where it's hosted. So it's kind of up to the developer on where that app lives. So you can host it in Azure, you could host it on your own cloud provider, you can host it wherever you want. And what we've done is we've kind of optimized as a path towards Azure App Service for right now, because that's pretty much the easiest way for us to get things from like a Blazor Server app and Visual Studio to the cloud. So we've optimized for that at the moment.
Okay.
But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking, in terms of that, and then also, the next one you were talking about on the list is like bot, and that you need like background processing and you know what I mean? You need to be like watching for things and responding, and that seems like a more complicated hosting scenario.
Yeah,
there, I guess.
Yeah, I'm still kind of exploring everything we need to do to configure all that. But today, as it is, the Teams dev portal lets you configure all these things. So here you can see this is the app I just created, and we're kind of editing it right now in the Teams developer portal. So this is kind of the management portal for my application. And here's the tab that I just created. So it's pointing at my local host. That way I can debug it. And if I wanted to add, more features to it, I can go to app features and I can add a bot here, and it kind of shows you the kind of things you need to configure. And this is all the type of stuff that we're working on building tooling around. So that way it's a little simpler to configure these things and kind of set them up. That's kind of the first scenario we want to do. And then the additional things it's done, if I come over here to Azure AD. So in order to work with SSO and Teams, you do need to use Azure Active Directory if you want to access the identity information of the logged in user in Teams. That way your application doesn't constantly need to ask for auth. Since the user is already using Teams, there's already some information about who that user is, and they're already allowed to use Teams. They're already in there, so you should be able to access that if you're a Teams app. And that's the type of like continuity we want to provide here and make that seamless. So you can see here's the Teams app I just created. It's already configured all this in Azure AD and set up the endpoints and everything. So no need to really go into the Azure portal. I'm only showing you this to show you that it's done something. And same with in the Teams portal. So these are things that the toolkit is all configured for you.
Okay. Other people too, like I'm still wrapping my head around like how I'm not hosting this. I mean, so you're showing it in a browser, but this could be running in the Teams client app as well. Like, so how, you know, Dorian asking, is this like some sort of like iframe or web viewer?
Yeah, as a tab application, it's hosting your app in an iframe. That's how a tab works. Today. That's correct.
And then would this will work anywhere Teams works? Like this will work on like the phone app and everywhere else?
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think that's one of the compelling scenarios I think that we've heard from customers is, you know, think you're in an enterprise solution or a business solution and you want to bring your application to mobile, and you already are living inside of Teams. It'd be a great way to almost have like an MDM solution, but you're using Teams. So you can, as an admin, you could choose like, I want this web application to go to these users, and it would just show up on Teams for them. There's no need for them to install anything. There's no MDM solution needed. You just all manage it within Teams. And they don't need to log in or sign up because they're already a Teams user. So you have all that identity information right there. So I think that's a pretty cool way to think about how you could use Teams apps. At least that's some of the neat scenarios I've heard of.
I've just personally, like, I work on a lot of different Teams, you know, at Microsoft, of course, and we use them for things like, hey, we're getting ready for a conference, or even like we use Teams for scheduling these live streams, and we'll go through and configure our Teams channel and pin different, you know, applications and things, like we'll add those to the team. So anyone else, like, and then sharing the links to the apps, and that's, okay, that's a question. How about like things like deep linking? Is there a way that I can like link into, you know, or link with some state or something into an application?
Yeah, I don't have a great example of that right now. It's kind of like all of these ways that you might integrate more deeply with Teams. Right now, the only thing we've done in the template is really just focused on identity. But as a Teams application and with the Teams SDK, you do get access to more than that. So think like if you wanted to deep link and open up your application, that's an option. So yeah, there's a couple really neat ways that you can kind of integrate with Teams. Unfortunately, I don't have a good sample of that right now. But you know, maybe that's something we need to add here. It's a good point.
So another question I've got, I'm just throwing a lot of questions at you.
Yeah, go for it. Love it.
So I see there's that Fluent button, and I think that's answering one of my questions, which is how do I style things so that they so that they look good in Teams? They look kind of Teams native. So is this using Fluent UI then? Yeah,
something that we worked with the Fluent and Fast Teams was to is exactly the question we had. How do we give developers a good jumpstart in providing their apps to look exactly, or I should say, to make them feel at home in Teams, so they look and feel and behave like other Teams apps that are kind of built in. And so that makes sense to use Fluent. So we have if I look at the dependencies over here, there's a package included here, which is the Fluent UI components. And that is an open source project on GitHub that shipped at build. a couple weeks ago. And so we've included this project by default, and it just gives you, it's basically a light wrapper around the Fluent UI web components. So you can use the Fluent design system, and then add, let's see if they have an example on here. There isn't, so I'll just go back to my code. There's Fluent button. There's also all the web components that Fluent has. They're wrapped as Blazor components, so you can use them here. And in the project here, we've provided some some links to styling that helps them look a little more like Teams. I think we can do a better job at providing a better default so things look and feel a little better. Right now, we've kind of just done a stopgap solution for that, but the ultimate goal here is to have a set of Fluent components that look and feel like Teams.
Okay, cool. We've got some questions coming in. Let me see. Another one from Curious Drive. Can we use an external authentication provider like Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, etc.?
I'm not entirely sure what the options are there.
I would guess, and I'm 90% here, I'm wrong here, but I think with Azure AD, you can hook it up like Azure AD, what is it, B2C, where you can integrate with other auth providers. I'm guessing. But
yeah, I'm not sure exactly how that fits into what's required for Teams. So I'd have to take a second look at that. I'm not sure.
Okay. And Mark is asking how to add other Graph API permissions, such as presence. So like in the configuration, I'm guessing that, well, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, this is another thing that we don't have an extensibility point for this yet.
Okay. All right.
So I think like this type of stuff, this is a good point. I think this is a good topic for this is the Teams FX library, which is a kind of single repo for the code extension, the CLI package, the SDK packages that we're referencing, which includes like the auth piece, which is the simple auth project, which handles all the token and scopes and things. These would be good areas to file an issue here that we can triage as like a feature request, things that you want to see and do. This is right now where we're kind of collecting feedback about the Visual Studio extension as well. But we're kind of treating this as a holistic project between code and VS and all the libraries used. So I think it'd be great to hear from people who have requirements like this.
Okay, I'm sharing a link to the repo in the chat here. Cool. Wow. Oh, I see too. There's other packages like a VS Code extension and CLI and stuff. So that's interesting. Okay. Well, so that maybe helps answer one of my next questions, which is like automation and CI/CD and that sort of thing. I'm guessing maybe using that CLI, I can get some of that set up.
Yeah. So as far as for project creation and scaffolding, right now we have a .NET New template. So it's on NuGet. You can actually, I think I had it on the, let's see. I think it's in here in our documentation here. Yeah. So this is how you can use the .NET New CLI for creating the project. And then as far as the Teams FX CLI, this is something we're still working to support. So right now the Teams FX CLI works for the JavaScript and TypeScript packages.
Okay.
But we have some support right now for some of the commands, like if you want to do the configure for SSO, if you want to set up the auth and Azure AD registrations, there's a CLI command for that. We have support for that. But there's also CLI commands for provisioning in Azure and deploying to the Teams dev portal and to Azure. And those are things that are in our backlog right now.
Okay, cool. I'm also seeing on the list there the Azure Functions support. So that seems like that could be pretty powerful to integrate with that as well. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, there's lots of cool stuff in here. Again, this is all stuff that we want to support, and some of this stuff in here is specific right now to what's available in Visual Studio Code for JavaScript and TypeScript. But we're working to do the same things for Blazor and C# in the Visual Studio extension as well. And really, it's about like, what do developers expect? We want to provide a .NET experience that makes sense. So some areas of this are maybe more in line with what you might expect working with JavaScript and TypeScript and Node and NPM And then when you go over to C# and Blazor, then we've made some decisions to do things different that we've heard feedback about, and we're still evolving and changing and kind of building out the toolkit.
Cool. Let me see. There's a question from Ronald on just kind of general roadmap.
Yeah, I don't think we have a published roadmap at the moment for the Teams FX or the extension projects. Right now they're in preview, so yeah, that's good feedback. I don't think we have one yet.
All right, let me see. A lot of good questions coming in. Cool. All right.
Yeah, love it.
Can we look more at the, like, so you showed the app. Can we look more at like I'm just interested in that. So this runs after it loads. And so this is after I've logged in, and then it's pulling stuff from my profile and displaying that.
Yeah, maybe it would help. Maybe I just walk through the template a little bit and show you kind of what's in there. Sure, I'll do my best. So I think it starts in the startup file like anywhere else. We've configured a little bit of middleware with the Teams FX simple auth package, which is necessary to do kind of the token exchange for the identity information from Teams and Azure AD. So there's a one-liner there for that. And then I think we have the main thing here is really this tab page, which is kind of the main area of the sample app. And we just have a button here, and I think the weird thing in here right now is this Teams FX class. So the Teams SDK is a JavaScript library, and right now we need to use that because the JavaScript library does things that you can really only do in JavaScript. Fortunately, Blazor has a really cool way of interoperating with JavaScript using this IJS runtime. So right now we've just included this class, which does a little bit of wrapping around some of the Teams FX, SDK, JavaScript methods, and gives you a kind of a C# way to access them. I think we're definitely want to improve this, but right now it's just included in the template. So this gives you kind of a C# API to do some of the JavaScript things. And there's really no way around that at the moment, but we are looking in ways that we might wrap the entire SDK, include it as a NuGet package, because there really isn't too much reason to change this. But right now it's included by default. So there's access to that, and that's kind of what's being handled here in the project. You can see there's a reference up here to the Teams FX class, and we do some commands that are required for Teams apps, like we call this init command. And I think there's some more in here to get the actual username. Yeah, so this is how it knows about my user. So that you get some basic information without granting authorization. So you can get like username and maybe a couple other basic information about them. But then anything else that you want, you need to authorize and then use the Graph API. And that's kind of what that little button did in this sample, where I gave it permission to use my graph information.
Okay.
I think is there anything else interesting in here? We have, so the launch setting is a little custom. And so we use this deep link with your application identifier. So when you press F5 or start debugging, it will open your application in Teams and prompt you with that add app thing. So you can kind of get a nice debugging experience there right into Teams. Otherwise, this would just open in a browser and you'd have no context of Teams. And so the Teams SDK in it wouldn't work because you're not running inside of Teams. So that's a little different here. The manifest file, which we talked about, which kind of defines everything about your application. And is there anything else?
So, and then so this creates a manifest. When you deploy it, then you said that manifest is pushed up into the portal. Mm-hmm. Then if I go in and tweak things in the portal, how do I keep those in sync? Do I just re-download that back into my source code, or?
Yeah, so this is the model we're still figuring out. Like, do we want to do something where we synchronize these things, or do we want to make the code the ultimate authority? Right now, it would be a manual process. So if you go into the dev portal and tweak things, you'd want to keep those in sync manually. Okay. The other thing that we want to work on is, how do you handle the difference for different developers collaborating on this project that might have different endpoints for like local host, and maybe their endpoint is a little different, or how do you handle production environments? The Teams dev portal has some cool features for that we don't support yet. So if we go back here, we look at the manifest, you can download it. And you can't edit this manifest directly in here, but you can edit it by going through the configure section. So there's like UI to edit these things. And then you can download it to get the manifest and any other app resources you have, like icons, etc. But the environments thing is really how you would configure like different endpoints. So in the dev portal, you have this way you can add an environment. Like I could do something for me, and then I can create an environment like this, and maybe I have that as my local host. And then I go into here, let's see, into my app, and I edit this. And there's like this, you do double brackets, and then you can see here's my environment variable that I just created, and I update that. So now whenever I go to manifest, you can see up here I have this little toggle. Now I can choose my environment, and then that will replace these values with whatever I've configured. So if I wanted to run, as me, or maybe I have a production environment, maybe I have someone else on the team, we can all have kind of our own configurations for this, and you can either download the package and do something with that, or you can just press these buttons to preview it right inside the Teams app. I think these are the type of workflows we don't have in the toolkit yet, or a way to do inside the IDE, but definitely something we're looking at.
Okay. One here, I think that's been answered, but just to make sure this is clarified. So the current thing that you've shipped is support for tab style apps. You're looking at what to build next, and I think you said bot was kind of high on the list. But that's correct, right? And right now this is only supporting a tab style app?
Yeah, right now when you create a Teams app using the template that the toolkit ships, it is a personal tab app. And we are looking at, the next thing we're looking at right now is how do you scaffold out a bot app and configure all of those services. So that is the next immediate step.
Are there so one thing is, like, the best level of support is where you've got a template that sets everything up for me and does all that. Are there samples of just, because I could imagine going through doing this and then saying, okay, now I want to hack at a bot app or something like that. Are there samples of a bot app written in .NET? You know what I mean? So I wouldn't have a nice template, but I could at least see an example.
I believe we do, but it's going, I don't think that they're using Blazor yet. So if I go back, let me find, where is the documentation here? Yeah, so we have some things in the docs for building bots. We also have some older samples on just how to create Teams apps using ASP.NET. So this tutorial focuses, I believe, on using ASP.NET.
Yeah, like with Razor Pages or something.
Yeah, so this is like an older sample. So it's not using Blazor. The up here with the personal app is Blazor. So the idea is as we support things in the toolkit, we'll slowly start replacing this with kind of the way we recommend creating these applications. And then also identifying some of those like key scenarios of here's how you build a bot with Blazor. Here's how you build a messaging extension. Here are the things you can extend, etc.
Got it. A good question from Chinmay asking, can we use third-party controls like Telerik for Blazor? I would guess yes, right? It's just it's a Blazor application. So like,
yeah, I don't know of any limitations that would prevent you from doing that.
Cool.
Yeah, sounds totally valid.
And that sounds really useful to do something like at a really nice, like say a dashboard or something, and put in some really nice charts and integrate that in. So
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, for tab applications, this is your web app, and we've kind of opinionated this template to focus on using Fluent UI components. But you could do whatever you want. That's just the way we've kind of defaulted things to make things look and feel like Teams. But if you have a totally custom identity you want to provide, sure, and you could bring whatever you want.
So as far as like what sort of app I could build for a personal tab app. So I've got the user's identity. I'm able to make use of Microsoft Graph. I'm able to make use of like other Teams APIs. So basically, and then I could, since I'm hosting it, I could have my own like data storage or whatever there as well, right? So I can work with other backend APIs. I could be looking up orders in a shipping API or whatever, right? I could be managing bug status, or I could do pretty much anything, right? And it's a personal app, so I'm working with a logged in, like I have a person's identity that I can use their identity to look stuff up and manage.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I think that the scenario becomes a little more compelling if your company is already living inside of Teams. Maybe you have some applications outside of Teams, or maybe you have some applications that aren't on the web yet that are paper processes, or kind of legacy ways of doing things that you want to optimize, and you want to bring it into Teams since your company is already working in Teams. So you can build a web app, put it right into Teams, and get access to that identity information. Get easier connected with things like through deep linking. Like if you have things in SharePoint documents, like I know a lot of times what happens is someone will link me a Word doc or something, and you can open it right inside of Teams. You never really have to leave. So I think that's kind of where the power of these come into play. Once you start integrating a little deeper with what's available to you inside of Teams.
That seems interesting to me. Like I could see, a team even like inside of say Microsoft, and they've already got a service that's available, and then they could, if they're comfortable building .NET apps, mostly they could surface that.
Yeah, like there's some pretty cool examples. So there, I'll share this. Maybe you can post this link too. Let me find it real quick. We had a build session a few weeks ago, and it's focused on the VS Code extension, but there's a lot of general information there about Teams apps, which I think is super helpful. So here's this, empowering developers with powerful tooling and enabling frictionless app adoption. So this is a really cool session. It talks about some of the compelling scenarios and gives a couple examples from enterprises who have built Teams applications and kind of the power that they've gotten from that, which I think is, if you're exploring like what's possible and why I might do this, there's some pretty compelling examples in here. So this would be something to listen to or to watch. But let's say, if you had an application like, I think one of the examples in there is like a performance review application. You put it inside of Teams, then you can link around, specific performance reviews and open them right inside your application that's running inside of Teams. Share notifications with users when a review is complete, that kind of stuff. So you don't have to leave the context of Teams.
Okay. I just shared in the chat the YouTube link to that session.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Okay. Are there weird edge cases or difficulties with debugging? Like, and I'm thinking of you personally, like as you've been working, because this is a very new project. This is a new thing that's just shipped, right? Are there debugging issues that you run into where you're like, why isn't it authenticating? Or how come this graph token is expired? Or, that sort of stuff?
Well, I think the safe answer is probably, or maybe, like everyone says, it depends. I haven't hit too many problems right now. Right now, things are pretty simple. So as we build things out with like bots and like tabs is probably the easiest scenario right now to understand as far as from a tooling standpoint. But once we get into a little more complex scenarios, my answer might change. I think the biggest hurdle we have right now is if things go wrong in Teams, do you get enough information to actually be actionable and do something about it? So for example, when I press F5 and that little dialog comes up that says add my app into Teams, if for some reason I have something misconfigured in my manifest, maybe I've mistyped a content URL or something, or if I'm working in production and my endpoint is actually not able to be hit. So if it's running in Azure or something and I've configured that, and do we give enough actionable information? I think that's where things start to break down a little bit. We can do a better job.
Interesting comment from Ronald saying we need to see adaptive card components with Blazor, just in general. I haven't dug deep into adaptive cards. They do seem pretty neat. But yeah, that does seem like that would be useful.
Yeah, I haven't really dived into that too much either.
Cool. Another one from Ronald saying, you wouldn't need to use like ngrok or something for local debugging because this hosts it for you. Like this is basically putting your iframe in, and so you're not needing. So I've used ngrok in the past to basically give an external URL to my local machine, but because of this, the magic of how this iframe is being hosted, I don't need to worry about that.
You don't for running like this sample with a personal tab that's running with Blazor Server, and yeah, you don't need to use ngrok or any tunneling solutions for that scenario. Okay. Once we introduce support for bots, then the story changes a little bit. That bot isn't running in bot framework, needs to be running, and it's running in the cloud. Teams need to be able to access that, and you're running something locally. So there are some setup with ngrok is the recommended thing we have in our documentation on how to set that up. So you do need a tunneling solution for that. It is all possible today. There's just a lot of configuration to get it done. So yeah, that's in the documentation on setting up ngrok for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. One other just semi-random question, but what was some of the most difficult work for the team to ship this? You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking in the context partly too of there were some existing like JavaScript, TypeScript based things of this, but this is the first time shipping like a Blazor version. What were some of the main challenges?
I think personally, my experience so far on the team is at working on this, the biggest challenge has been what do .NET developers expect, and what are they used to? And so how do we take the concepts we've had on kind of scaffolding out a good solution and an opinionated solution on how to build these applications and provide that in a .NET world that makes sense? We don't want to just take what we've done in TypeScript and JavaScript and copy paste it over to Visual Studio and slap Blazor on it. So we've kind of taken it from the ground up and said, like, do we use this library, or do we need to do something different? Do we scaffold out, this way or that way? So I think that's really been the hardest point, was kind of making those decisions. And we've already gotten some good feedback from the community on these things. Decisions were good, and some that were not so good. So that just gives us a way to pivot and say, like, you know what, we didn't make the right choice here. Let's build it out the way that the community wants. One example of that is early on, we had this requirement where you had to install Node.js and you had to npm install some packages in order to even run the template, and that just really didn't feel like a good solution for .NET. So we had to do some extra work to make sure that we didn't have to do all those things, and we had .NET libraries included by default and not npm packages. So that's one that was called out as like, hey, I'm glad I don't have to npm install right away. That's cool. So that that's an example that pops out of my mind.
Okay. So Mark has a question that I think we can look at more broadly too, is if I have an existing Razor app, is there a checklist to bring it into Teams? And you showed that example in the docs earlier with building an app using just ASP.NET, so not Blazor specifically. But I would think that's where you'd start, right?
Yeah, I feel like somewhere in here there's like one specifically for that. I know the sample I have open right now is that, but it's not quite like a check mark. Trying to look and see here if this is the one I'm thinking of. But if you walk through this, you can get kind of the steps of what's needed. But it's not quite as simple as a check mark list. Which is, something like I mentioned earlier, something we're looking at is how do you take an existing app and can we build tooling around that and bring it into Teams in, a couple clicks or less and make a really smooth transition for that. Or how do you integrate your own auth providers into these things if you've already done an ASP.NET? These are questions we have and we're kind of designing right now.
All right, cool.
I think, anyway, that's probably a long way to say, like, the best thing would be to take a look at this documentation. And if it doesn't have what you need, submit the feedback and we'll add it. So on all the docs, I'm sure everyone knows this, but at all the docs, you just click it on and go right to GitHub repo. It's open source, file an issue, and most likely if it's .NET related and Teams, it will get assigned to me and the team, and we will update it to what you need. That's no problem.
Great. So related to that, Taylor asking, where's the best place for the community to provide feedback?
Yeah, great question. So let me see. I thought I had this open. Yeah, so I think right now, the easiest answer for that is to go to the Teams FX repo. It's part of the Office Dev organization on GitHub, and you can go here and file an issue. I think that's probably the simplest. Just go ahead and do that. We'll take it. We'll tag it with the VS tag here if it's .NET related, or the VS extension. Triage it, and we'll start a dialogue with the community there. I think that's probably the easiest way.
I've shared that in the chat, and then I'm also there. It is. Put that in the banner there. Well, I think that's a great overview of what's available, and I think what you showed there, like that flash by in just a few seconds, but those are the things where normally, like, go get this token, log in here, now configure this, now do this. Those are the things that, like when I want to get started building something and I see a tutorial that's like a super long scroll bar and 90 steps and things to type, those are the things that make me not want to, get started. And so that I think this is a great example here where it's just like, boom, 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 run it. And then I can start tweaking it. And, but I've got things configured in a good spot. So.
Yeah, that's kind of the opinion we've had, and that's what we've heard, is that the top pain point for developing these things has been working with identity, and maybe identity is a challenge across the board. So that's what we focused on solving right now. Is just let's focus on solving configuring identity for Teams applications and make that as simple as possible. So now it's what's next, and that's where we're looking for feedback. I saw a question in there from Taylor. If there's a voting process, bots are number one. Yeah, is there? I don't know if you can pop that up, but I thought that was a good question. I think the answer is yes, and we're looking for feedback, and it also that impacts the priority of things. If suddenly we got a wave of information that bots are not a priority, then we definitely would take that into consideration. Maybe we need to shift priorities. So this is how we build products, is listening to feedback. So it's valuable to hear from you.
Can you show, I mean, now I know you showed it earlier on, but now in that context, could you show the different types of Teams apps again? Like you showed earlier, there's I thought that was really interesting.
Well, let me
see. Go through 90 different tabs here.
I think so here. These are kind of like the extensibility points, and they're called capabilities. Is kind of the terminology used throughout the documentation. So there's personal apps, which is scoped to a single user, or you can put tabs as in a channel or in a group chat that you want to see multiple or a whole team use. There's different ways to configure that. There's bots. There's messaging extensions, which if you're in Teams and right below where you type in text when you're sending a message, there's a couple different little icons for different things, and some tenants may have some custom apps, like there might be a GitHub icon, or there might be an Azure DevOps icon. Those are apps that have extended messaging, so you can do things like reference an Azure DevOps bug number or something, and it puts a little card in there that has like some contextual information, stuff like that. Meeting extensions, the whiteboard app is an idea. An example that's included. That's I believe that's like an extension of a meeting. Webhooks and connectors. I think those are pretty much available on any chat application, and integrating with Graph.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting. Okay, so so that's the place where people can go out to that repo and vote things up and down and let you know. So. And I do think, as somebody called out earlier, like I love seeing a roadmap. That's a vote for me for that. I always love to see a public roadmap, and then people can comment. Totally. Very cool. All right, this seems like a pretty good place to wrap up. And anything else you'd like to add, or?
No. Thanks for having me on to chat about it. And things are very early. I definitely recognize that, but it's a good time for us to get feedback, and for anyone that's excited about this, reach out, submit an issue, and we can build something great together.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks a bunch, everybody, and thanks, John. This was a cool overview.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.